and technical support services. Are you considering exploring the cashew industry or already a stakeholder? The African Cashew Alliance invites you to become a member today. Membership at ACA provides diverse benefits including access to profiles of other ACA members for business-to-business and networking, an extensive database for cashew stakeholders, discounted conference and event fees, discounted technical assistance and business advisory packages, electronic newsletters, quarterly reports and analysis on the cashew sector, and many other benefits. We also offer services in line with having a sustainable African cashew industry. These include market information system, quality and sustainability seal, technical assistance to processes, investment support, and access to finance. The Global Market Encounter (GME) with Jim Fitzpatrick is an iForum brought to you by the African Cashew Alliance (ACA). GME provides a unique platform for diverse stakeholders to challenge assumptions and learn while discarding information that is obvious to be false, separating facts from fiction, and providing an accurate and timely market update are the core mandates of the GME. The GME is a free bi-weekly webinar that takes place on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. GMT and brings together participants from both the private and public sectors, ensuring that a unique perspective is brought on board. The Cashew Master Training Program (MTP) is a tailored cashew training which consists of 3 one-week classroom and practical sessions that provide a facilitated platform for exchange, with the goal of creating a pool of technical and managerial expertise and facilitating regional exchange among cashew experts by sharing lessons learned and innovations at the regional and national levels. The Cashew MTP is designed for a sustainable industry. Trained experts in each country become resource persons for knowledge transfer in several areas, including agronomy and cashew orchard management, post-harvest management and cashew product quality, processing and value addition to cashew and its byproducts, market mechanism, nut and kernel market analysis, business relationships among stakeholders, value chain development, assistance with self-financing, among others. After 16 editions, the ACA Annual Cashew Conference and Expo has become the iconic cashew event in Africa and beyond. The ACA conference offers a one-of-a-kind opportunity for African and international cashew industry stakeholders to come together and discuss industry challenges and opportunities, find solutions, construct and refresh partnerships to build a sustainable and competitive cashew industry. Several African cashew producing countries have hosted the ACA Annual Cashew Conference, notably Mozambique, Tanzania, Côte d'Ivoire, Gambia, Benin, Ghana, business-to-business meetings, World Cashew Expo, and a variety of networking and social events. Save the date and remember, all roads lead to Dakar, Senegal.
Africa. A continent thriving with opportunities. 70% of the world's cocoa, 53% of the world's cashew. The resource-rich continent is at a turning point. By 2030, Africa will be home to 20% of the world's population and 75% of people aged under 35. Yet, across the continent, some dynamics persist. The continent continues to export raw natural resources at low cost. Meanwhile, the resilience of its economies is tested by unemployment, poverty, and a global pandemic. Despite the challenges, together we can unlock this potential. At Arise IIP, our vision is to build an African industry. Our ambition is to shift Africa from a global commodity supplier to a global manufacturing powerhouse. We do this by identifying industrial gaps in African countries. We then design tailor-made infrastructure and solutions to enable the sustainable and local transformation of raw materials. In Gabon, where 85% of the land is covered by dense and pristine rainforest, we created from scratch a vibrant local timber industry. It did not happen overnight. We brought together local timber industry players and attracted foreign investors to create a competitive timber processing ecosystem. For this ecosystem to flourish, we attracted foreign investors, establishing linkages across the whole value chain, organizing trade shows for hosted companies to showcase and market their timber products, and boosting exports. GSE's Wood Cluster is now composed of 90 companies operating from the first to the third transformation of timber. All of them transforming ethically and sustainably sourced Gabonese wood. In less than 10 years, Gabon shifted from a net log exporter to the first exporter of veneer in Africa and second in the world. In fact, the real impact was much wider and more meaningful. With GSES, Arise IIP has created 16,000 jobs, attracted 120 investors coming from 18 different countries, operating in 19 industry sectors. In Togo, Benin, and Côte d'Ivoire, our work is underway following the same approach. Cotton, cashew, soya, cocoa. We enable the transformation of local agricultural products with modern infrastructures and integrated logistics services. By investing in local manufacturing, we ultimately seek to replace foreign imports with domestic production. In all our endeavors, we are driven by the pursuit of green, sustainable growth, one that can last for generations to come. We are the pioneer of a green, responsible industrialization, one that ensures gender diversity, sustainability, traceability, and a zero-waste policy. This is why we create innovative solutions that support a climate-conscious economic development in Africa. This starts with neutralizing carbon emissions and creating a positive environmental legacy. By 2022, all of Arise IIP's industrial zones will be carbon neutral, powered fully by solar technology. This is all made possible by the dedication and commitment of the women and men who work at Arise. Together, we are on a journey to build an African industry, a journey to create a better, more resilient, sustainable, and inclusive future for everyone. Arise IIP, committed to making Africa thrive.
Dans ce contexte actuel de crise sanitaire mondiale liée à la pandémie de la COVID-19, il s'avère fondamental de relever la participation des femmes dans tous les maillons de la production, d'encourager et de renforcer leur leadership et leur résilience pour favoriser leur autonomisation, surtout dans le domaine économique. TechnoServe Bénin et l'Agence territoriale de développement agricole Pôle 4 s'inscrivent activement dans cette dynamique. À cet effet, le 15 et 16 octobre 2020, s'est tenue dans la salle de conférence de l'ATDA Pôle 4 à Parakou une cérémonie de célébration de la Journée internationale de la femme rurale édition 2020. Cette journée a pour objectif de définir les modalités de mise en œuvre d'une stratégie de renforcement du leadership et d'une résilience plus accrue des femmes dans les différentes activités de développement socio-économique.
Dans la plupart des décisions, ces femmes-là ne bénéficient pas des avantages qui sont liés au développement économique de chaque pays. Donc, pour les valoriser davantage, la communauté internationale a dédié la journée du 15 octobre pour les célébrer. Comme nous sommes en partenariat avec des projets, programmes, ils ont décidé de nous accompagner pour pouvoir célébrer l'événement au niveau local. Ces femmes-là sont aussi présentes surtout au niveau du maillon transformation. C'est pourquoi nous leur avons demandé de ne pas venir seulement pour écouter les discours, mais qu'elles viennent avec leur chef-d'œuvre pour qu'on puisse voir ce qu'elles font et les gens vont aussi profiter pour se ravitailler.
En effet, dans sa stratégie de renforcement des capacités des acteurs de la filière cajou, Technoserve, à travers Bénin Cajou, fournit des assistances techniques spécifiques et appropriées à la satisfaction des besoins des partenaires du public et du privé afin de promouvoir la production des noix brutes d'anacarde, le développement des chaînes de valeur et l'amélioration des revenus, notamment ceux des femmes.
Les braves femmes rurales sont effectivement à l'honneur aujourd'hui. Nous les félicitons et nous les exhortons à mettre leur résilience au service de nos communautés, surtout en cette période de pandémie. Et nous voulons les rassurer du soutien de Technoserve pour une plus grande intégration du genre dans les chaînes de valeur de la filière anacarde.
Rappelons qu'au cours de cette messe agricole et rurale de haute facture, diverses autorités ont accompagné la TDA et Technoserve à accélérer les meilleures innovations des produits dérivés du cajou et renforcer les aptitudes des femmes leaders et résilientes dans la filière cajou. Aussi faut-il le souligner, l'ambiance a été motivante et festive, marquée par 2 temps forts, portant notamment sur les réflexions et les partages d'expériences sur la résilience des femmes dans la chaîne de valeur anacarde et l'exposition vente des meilleures innovations réussies en faveur des femmes dans le développement socio-économique.
C'est grâce à Bénin Cajou que ça a été organisé dans le Nord, précisément à Parakou. Et ça a permis aux femmes des 2 Nords de participer. Je veux dire à Takora Donga, Borgo, Albori, Zoukoline, le centre aussi. Voilà pourquoi je tiens à remercier très sincèrement Bénin Cajou. Et cette séance aujourd'hui nous a permis de partager les expériences des autres femmes. C'est déjà un plus pour nous. Et pour nous qui sommes arrivés, je nous demande à notre retour de passer l'information à celles qui ne sont pas venues, pour qu'elles puissent aussi être informées de ce que nous sommes venus faire. C'est ce qui manque souvent. Et ça fait que les informations, nous les gardons et les autres n'ont plus d'informations aussi. Ça ne permet pas un développement du groupe. Donc je nous demande de souvent communiquer, de partager l'information avec les autres femmes aussi de nos groupes.
Notons que dans la vision de travailler pour une véritable accélération et intégration de la filière cajou au Bénin, avec une part conséquente pour les femmes, l'intégration du genre constitue l'un des principaux axes d'intervention de Technoserve via le projet Bénin Cajou.
Le projet Bénin Cajou a inscrit dans ses priorités, à compter de l'année 2019, des activités pour la sensibilisation des acteurs en vue d'une meilleure prise en compte de l'intégration du genre dans les différents maillons de la production. C'est à ce titre qu'après avoir milité en amont par un plaidoyer auprès de la FENAPAB pour l'amendement des textes en faveur d'une plus grande intégration du genre, Bénin Cajou a soutenu en aval le processus de renouvellement des organes de gestion de la FENAPAB, qui s'est achevé le 23 septembre 2019 avec l'élection à sa tête d'une femme, Madame Saadatou Tachi, en tant que présidente du conseil d'administration.
Après mon élection à la FENAPAB, les impressions sont bonnes. Surtout être à la tête d'une fédération nationale des producteurs d'anacarde du Bénin. Les points clés de mes actions sont relatifs à la recherche des partenaires pour améliorer la qualité de nos activités, développer le plaidoyer à l'endroit de l'État pour qu'il nous accompagne.
Mariée et mère de 3 enfants, Madame Saadatou est propriétaire de 5 plantations d'anacardiers de 7 hectares et demi à Pénésoulou dans la commune de Bassila, à 372 km de Cotonou. Entrée dans la production du cajou depuis 1998 et précédemment chef quartier, cette mère dévouée gère en subsidiaire son restaurant, son commerce de savon et mène des œuvres sociales en faveur des orphelins de son arrondissement. Brave et vaillante, elle exhorte son équipe et les femmes dans la filière cajou à se battre pour pousser loin la filière.
Pour réussir ma mission, c'est un engagement efficace de l'équipe. Ensuite aussi, il y a la disponibilité que toutes les femmes adhèrent aux coopératives de leur localité, entretenir bien les champs disponibles, celles qui n'en ont pas encore n'ont qu'à produire et surtout faire la vente groupée.
Le directeur général de la Fédération nationale des producteurs d'anacarde du Bénin, FENAPAB, explique ici les raisons qui ont soutenu cette action d'éclat manifestée par l'élection d'une femme à la présidence du conseil d'administration de la FENAPAB.
Depuis la création de la FENAPAB en 2006, elle a été gérée par les hommes. Déjà en septembre 2019, les hommes et les femmes ont souhaité mettre maintenant les femmes à la tête de cette organisation pour gérer ces deux organes-là, conseil d'administration et conseil de surveillance.
La commune de Basila n'est pas restée en marge de ce processus car la mairie s'est illustrée récemment dans des actes forts en faveur des femmes pour la filière cajou.
Il faut dire que c'est un honneur pour nous et une fierté de savoir que une dame de ma commune, à la personne de Madame Ata Kakayachi Sada, a été élue. C'est en même temps un défi pour nous.
Avec ce coup d'éclat, Madame Atta, présidente de la FENAPAB, élue pour 3 ans depuis le 23 septembre 2019, expose ici succinctement un plan de sa vision pour la filière cajou qui ne peut évidemment pas se réaliser sans le précieux concours des autorités en charge de l'agriculture au Bénin.
Actuellement, nous sommes à 130 000 tonnes. Mon souhait est qu'on fasse le double, sinon même pourquoi pas le triple du tonnage antérieur. Et ensuite, qu'on puisse transformer plus de la moitié de ces produits au niveau local, chez nous, pour le plein essor de cette filière. Les activités à mener, c'est de continuer le plaidoyer envers le public, les privés, dans le renforcement des capacités.
Founded in 2006, the African Cashew Alliance (ACA) is an industry alliance for both African and international businesses interested in promoting a globally competitive African cashew industry. It is a member-based organization whose members represent all aspects of the cashew value chain, including producers, processors, traders, and international buyers. At the African Cashew Alliance, our vision is to have a sustainable African cashew industry that delivers globally competitive value-added products and secures profitability for all. On a bigger scale, our mission is to create a platform for accelerating growth and investments in the African cashew industry through partnerships, advocacy, market linkages, technical support, and global networking. The African Cashew Alliance seeks to achieve its vision based on pertinent 4 pillars, which are to 1. Facilitate networking among members and offer timely information on the cashew sector. 2. Advocate for sector improvements and partnerships. 3. Facilitate food safety standards. And 4. Increase processing in Africa through investment promotion and technical support services. Are you considering exploring the cashew industry or already a stakeholder? The African Cashew Alliance invites you to become a member today. Membership at ACA provides diverse benefits including access to profiles of other ACA members for business-to-business and networking, an extensive database for cashew stakeholders, discounted conference and event fees, discounted technical assistance and business advisory packages, electronic newsletters, quarterly reports and analysis on the cashew sector, and many other benefits. We also offer services in line with having a sustainable African cashew industry. These include market information system, quality and sustainability seal, technical assistance to processors, investment support, and access to finance. The Global Market Encounter GME with Jim Fitzpatrick is an iForum brought to you by the African Cashew Alliance ACA. GME provides a unique platform for diverse stakeholders to challenge assumptions and learn while discarding information that is obvious to be false, separating facts from fiction, and providing an accurate and timely market update are the core mandates of the GME. The GME is a free bi-weekly webinar that takes place on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. GMT and brings together participants from both the private and public sectors, ensuring that a unique perspective is brought on board. The Cashew Master Training Program (MTP) is a tailored cashew training which consists of 3 one-week classroom and practical sessions that provide a facilitated platform for exchange, with the goal of creating a pool of technical and managerial expertise and facilitating regional exchange among cashew experts by sharing lessons learned and innovations at the regional and national levels. The Cashew MTP is designed for a sustainable industry. Trained experts in each country become resource persons for knowledge transfer in several areas, including agronomy and cashew orchard management, post-harvest management and cashew product quality, processing and value addition to cashew and its byproducts, market mechanism, nut and kernel market analysis, business relationships among stakeholders, value chain development, assistance with self-financing, among others. After 16 editions, the ACA Annual Cashew Conference and Expo has become the iconic cashew event in Africa and beyond. The ACA Conference offers a one-of-a-kind opportunity for African and international cashew industry stakeholders to come together and discuss industry challenges and opportunities, find solutions, construct and refresh partnerships to build a sustainable and competitive cashew industry. Several African cashew producing countries have hosted the ACA Annual Cashew Conference, notably Mozambique, Tanzania, Côte d'Ivoire, Gambia, Benin, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Tanzania, and Nigeria. For the 17th edition in 2023, the conference will be hosted by Senegal from the 18th to the 21st of September in the famous and vibrant city of Dakar. The ACA conference features plenary sessions by experts from all sectors of the cashew industry, thematic forums, numerous business-to-business meetings, World Cashew Expo, and a variety of networking and social events. Save the date and remember, all roads lead to Dakar, Senegal. Contact the African Cashew Alliance via mail aca@africancashewalliance.com or call +223 302 904951. You are welcome to meet the ACA team at its secretariat, situated on the 31 Boundary Road, East Legon, Accra, Ghana. For more
Africa. A continent thriving with opportunities. 70% of the world's cocoa, 53% of the world's cashew. The resource-rich continent is at a turning point. By 2030, Africa will be home to 20% of the world's population and 75% of people aged under 35. Yet, across the continent, some dynamics persist. The continent continues to export raw natural resources at low cost. Meanwhile, the resilience of its economies is tested by unemployment, poverty, and a global pandemic. Despite the challenges, together we can unlock this potential. At Arise IIP, our vision is to build an African industry. Our ambition is to shift Africa from a global commodity supplier to a global manufacturing powerhouse. We do this by identifying industrial gaps in African countries. We then design tailor-made infrastructure and solutions to enable the sustainable and local transformation of raw materials. In Gabon, where 85% of the land is covered by dense and pristine rainforest, we created from scratch a vibrant local timber industry. It did not happen overnight.
Recording in
We
progress.
brought together local timber industry players and attracted foreign investors to create a competitive timber processing ecosystem. For this ecosystem to flourish, we attracted foreign investors, establishing linkages across the whole value chain, organizing trade shows for hosted companies to showcase and market their timber products, and boosting exports. GSE's Wood Cluster is now composed of 90 companies operating from the first to the third transformation of timber. All of them transforming ethically and sustainably sourced Gabonese wood. In less than 10 years, Gabon shifted from a net log exporter to the first exporter of veneer in Africa and second in the world. In fact,
Morning, Blessing. How are you? Great. Good morning, everyone. And you're very welcome to our session. Today, we're going to have a market update, and we're going to focus on countries that we normally focus on at this time of year, but sometimes we don't hear too much in general market reports on these countries. So those countries are the Gambia, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, and the Republic of Guinea. So we're going to start, and I'll give you a rundown on the markets. Then we'll have our guests. I'll introduce them to you in a moment. And then that'll follow with the usual questions and answers, comments. And you're very welcome to ask any question, whether on the subjects we're touching on today or on other Cashew-related subjects. We're always happy to hear your questions and your comments. You can use the chat, or you can come on and talk to us. Our guests today, and we're lucky today to have some really interesting guests. Some of them have been with us before. One of those is John Rao. John is based in Guinea-Bissau. He's always a pleasure to listen to on the subject of the cashew trade, and particularly the cashew trade in the sub-region that we're talking about, and especially in Guinea-Bissau. So John's been with us before, and I'd like to welcome him back. We're also going to be joined by Tierno Hamidou Balde from Republic of Guinea. He is an entrepreneur. He's a consultant. He has a long association with the African Cashew Alliance, and he's joining us again after about a year, I think. And he also is very welcome, and we're looking forward to his comments. Sometimes we don't hear an awful lot about Guinea and the progress in the crop and the progress in the sector, but hopefully we can change that today. Our third guest, our guests, is new, and we'd like to welcome them. This is the LIFT project, a USDA Shelter for Life project based in Senegal, but covering the entire sub-region. And we're joined today by Mamadou Balde, the Deputy Chief of Party, and Omar Cisse, Acting Market Access Project Manager. They're very welcome. The project is linking farmers to export and to process, promoting access to finance, working on policy, a whole range of really interesting interventions that are having a big impact in the region. So to our four guests, I bid you a very warm welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing from them. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about the market. I'll give you a quick market update from our perspective. Hasn't been particularly eventful couple of weeks, a couple of interesting stories, but nothing particularly dramatic. As we've sometimes seen in the month of April, it goes a little bit quiet. So looking at kernels first, the kernels prices have been relatively static. I would say the market could be described as steady, not particularly volatile right now. Buyers, particularly Western buyers, are quite cautious at the moment. They don't quite believe some of the things they're seeing, but trade has definitely picked up. On the economic front, we are seeing quite encouraging factors that may well stimulate demand as the year goes on. So, for example, we're seeing US inflation at its lowest rate since May 2021. That is below 5%. And I was reading an economics professor. That's what I do in my spare time, sadly. And he was saying it's no longer a headline once it gets below 5%. So in other words, inflation in the US, if it stays below this 5%, is no longer a headline. And that could have a positive impact on the industry as the year goes on, particularly as it's happened early enough in the year for buyers to make decisions that will affect their demand in the course of this year. In the European Union, the other really big buying market in Western Europe, inflation still 6.9% in March figure, but on the positive side, that is the sixth monthly decline in a row. I know for a fact that here in Ireland, it's back down just above 4%. So very strong trends economically coming back from the shocks of last year. And that will, it's not going to immediately impact buyers, but it is going to bring back some confidence, and we should see a pickup in demand, particularly as prices are so low. So we're not seeing the impact yet at the import side, but we're certainly seeing it on shipments from Vietnam. And we are definitely seeing more buying interest from Europe. There's less around in the way of inventories. There's less around in the way of sold stock and unsold stock. People will have to replace that as the year goes on. And we're not that far away from the peak packing seasons in either the US or Europe. We're talking about getting into those in June and July for the busy second half of the year. So there is buying interest to cover. There is a little bit of I describe it as a mismatch between when the buyers need to buy at the retail level and the trajectory of the market. So naturally, buyers are quite cautious after last year. You would expect that. You would have expected that they would be building cover at this point, that they would be going further forward. But the timing is not exactly right. So retailers generally buy in quite a disciplined fashion. They buy at certain times of year. So if these buying opportunities happen at times when they are not in buying mode, we don't see that activity. And that might be more so in Europe than in the United States, because in the United States, we have much more involvement of indirect channels, that is importers, who may well be more likely to come and build positions in anticipation of future demand. Plus, we have a much more stratified market, and to a certain extent, a more diverse market, although that has been closing in recent years. In India, and we always need to keep an eye on demand in India, it seems that demand has been picking up. Certainly, imports are steady on the RCN side, more of that in a few minutes. And it still looks positive, but there's no real spark in the Indian market, I'd say, for the time being. RCN buyers, again, appear to be relatively cautious, despite quite positive figures on imports, and despite pretty attractive prices for Indian buyers, especially on raw cashew nuts in West Africa. So what are the origin impacts of this? So first of all, we have seen a further decline in farm gate prices in West Africa and in Cambodia, to a certain extent in Vietnam too. We've seen a slow RCN trade as prices stabilize. Nobody likes to buy in a falling market, and naturally people are staying out as a result, so less trade than normal. Maybe a little bit more picking up this week, but it has been relatively quiet for the time of year. The markets right across West Africa are below minimum farm gate prices, minimum guide prices, minimum reference prices, and this is a challenge. Again, we mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but it's probably got more difficult in the past 2 weeks for governments who are seeking to deal with this. Is multifaceted problem. On the one hand, you have farmers who have been guaranteed a minimum price. On the other hand, you have processors who have an outstanding opportunity to build their processing businesses this year with competitive RCN prices. And then you have the export trade, which is relatively quiet, but having dropped back, and it's dropped back quite away from the beginning of the season, having dropped back now to levels that are not quite workable, but getting there, we should see RCN buying interest in. So it's quite a difficult one, and there are question marks for regulatory bodies as to whether they should revise prices. It's probably true this year that most of them set prices too high to begin with. Revising that is always difficult. It's market, it's politics, it's credibility. How do you do that? And that's not easy. And generally speaking, there's no mechanism for regulatory bodies to revise prices downwards. Although I understand we might see some activity on that in Ghana, although the season in Ghana obviously is very far advanced. In Vietnam, we see some interesting news over the last couple of weeks. Again, this subject of the Burma kernels. And this time we're seeing Vinacas calling for the government intervention in the Burma kernels market. Burma kernels are the part-processed kernels, the unpeeled cashew kernels, and we've seen quite a bit of trade from African countries to Vietnam for further processing in the last few years. But there was some trade to India going back a few years, but the Indian government acted on that, and now that trade is primarily into Vietnam. We're going to come back to that shortly, but let's have a look at some of the trade statistics first over the past week to try and get, really we look at these to try and get a measure of where we stand right now and where we stand in comparison to earlier years. So first of all, we're going to look at the trade in kernels. So Vietnam, by far the largest exporter in the world, huge share of markets in China, in the US, in Europe. How have their kernels exports fared in the period January to the 15th of April, the latest figures that we have? So on the chart on the left-hand side, you can see the first half April figure for 4 years, the last 3 years, and then the pre-pandemic year, 2019. And what we see is first half of April, again, pretty healthy performance. You can't read too much into the first half of any month's figures, but nonetheless, pretty healthy performance. 24,300 tons against 21,400 last year, and so on. So we're looking at a pretty good first half of April. What should we say about that? Only that it continues the trend that we've seen in the early part of the year so far. More revealing would be the trade over the January to the 15th of April 2023. And again, the comparison. So a pretty healthy figure. We are 7.8, almost 8% up versus last year. About the same as 2021. And bear in mind, 2021 was the record year for exports. And in case anyone ever adopts that short-term thinking that we're so fond of in the cashew business, compare 2023, January to 15th of April, to the same period in 2019. And you will see that exports from Vietnam are up 42%. So if we take that 5-year perspective, we're looking at a very healthy industry. And if we look at these figures, January, 15th, April, throughout that period, again, very, very healthy. Bear in mind that really the problems of last year started from June onwards. That's when we saw the drop-off in figures. So we will expect to see these figures reflected in imports at destination in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And we'll have a look at those the next time when we talk again on the GME. There is a question though, I mean, where are all these kernels going? Because we're getting a lot of talk from people that the market's dead, there's nothing happening. And yet the numbers are telling us that shipments are quite healthy. So if the market's dead, where are all these going? And we do need to keep asking these questions because, as always, the market information in the cashew business is often measured to suit the interests of the people sending out that information. Let's have a look at imports. So we're talking about imports of raw cashew nuts into Vietnam. Same measure, first half April compared to each of the last 2 years plus 2019. Again, we see not as good a performance in that period, if in first half April. Imports slightly down, but if we look at the January to the 15th of April period, we see that imports into Vietnam are up by about 8%. I've left out 2020 figures because 2020 figures were completely distorted, as we know. In any case, the 2021 figure probably distorted too. Certainly there's no way I can make, in my own calculations, that I can make a balance out of 2021 imports into Vietnam. So really all we've got here is to look at imports during this year compared to imports during last year. And again, if we look back pre-pandemic, we see that there is a huge increase. So again, Vietnam's imports are up. You would expect that. You would expect it because Cambodia is more and more a factor over the last 3 years. So Cambodia, if we go back to 2019, Cambodia wasn't really a factor in terms of the kind of volume we see nowadays. So you have this situation of this big jump at this time of year. And this is having a knock-on effect. So this is having a knock-on effect in West Africa, where Vietnamese processors are much more likely to source their early season material in Cambodia, naturally, than they will in West Africa. And maybe we'll talk about that shortly as well. That's kind of exposing the infrastructure deficit in West Africa on the RCN trade too. But I want to come to an issue that's again come to our attention over the past week or so, and that is the Burma kernels issue. And it's becoming a big issue in Vietnam. And it's been described by Vinacas in media articles this last week as a threat to the sector. And their numbers are suggesting that we have seen, in terms of kernels, about 10,000 tons of Burma kernels imported in January, February. They say in 2022 was 78,000 kernels. And if we compare that to the Vietnamese crop on the left in kernels and on the right in terms of conversion to RCN basis, we would see, according to their figures, Vietnam has imported more Burma kernels than RCN it has produced, which would be remarkable. So continuing, and this is the Vinacas story I'm telling you now, this is not necessarily my opinion. So they're suggesting that this is a big foreign business. Big trading companies are being blamed on this. It's costing a loss of jobs and a loss of revenue in Vietnam. And they are pointing out, and of course in this they're absolutely correct, that Burma kernels come in tariff-free to Vietnam, but African countries tax exports of raw cashew nuts. So they're making pretty good points here. Let's just fact check a little bit of it. And let's have a look at what the official trade figures from UN Comtrade, which are supplied by Vietnam Customs. We don't have 2022 figures yet, but we do have 2021. So 2021 figures tell us that the reported import was around about 25,000 tons. Same for 2020, and you can see how that trade has grown up 2018, 19, 20, and then easing off a little in 2021. So it does seem difficult, I feel, to accept the figure of 71,000 tons, 78,000 tons actually, of Burma kernels imports mentioned by Vinacas. And I wonder, is that a figure for all nuts, maybe including some almonds, macadamias, and other nuts that might be imported for further processing in Vietnam? Whether it is or not, they've made an issue of it. And that's the important thing. And they're offering a solution. And the solution they're suggesting is that West African countries should drop the export tax on raw cashew nuts, or Vietnam should tax Burma kernels at a rate mentioned of 25% ad valorem and introduce a floor price. The floor price idea comes from what's happened in India, where the minimum price plus the high import tariff has halted the imports of kernels, at least the legal imports of kernels and Burma kernels into India. Whether or not this is a negotiating stance to ask African countries to reduce their export taxes on RCN, or whether it's a genuine concern as to the impact of the Burma kernels on the Vietnamese sector, remains to be seen. I mean, the import of Burma kernels is pretty much limited to a small group of companies that have a presence in West Africa and in Vietnam. I'm sure you can guess who they are. So it's becoming a big issue in Vietnam. I think it should be a big issue in African countries. And if we just look at this and the impact of this trade, I see it in really in three areas. First of all, the loss of revenue and jobs by part processing rather than fully processing. Secondly, a loss of revenue to the governments. But the real problem, I think, here is that it's causing serious brand damage to African cashew processing. If we think about this, what does it say to be exporting part processed kernels to Vietnam, some of which are then peeled and sent further afield? What it says is that processing in Africa doesn't work. People doing this business, they're essentially taking all the advantages, including subsidies in some countries, certainly tax breaks in almost all countries. They're taking those which were introduced to attract processing, and then they're doing a kind of a shortcut, a kind of a fiscal play. And what it says is that processing in Africa does not work. And I think that's what investors and buyers are going to hear. And I also noted in the Vietnamese press release from Vinacas, their suggestion was that African kernels are of lower quality. Well, that's not a fact. The fact is, and we talked about this on this event in the last 2 sessions, the fact of the matter is that most of the kernels produced in Africa these days are better quality than the kernels produced in Vietnam. And we can show that looking at the product. But it is, to my mind, quite a serious problem. It is giving all the wrong messages. It is having an impact on jobs, revenue, and I think it would be better to support processors to do the full process in African countries where that support is needed, rather than to encourage the trade in Burma kernels. Let's have a look then at India, and we'll have a look at the situation in India in terms of the imports of raw cashew nuts. As you know, India is no longer a major exporter of kernels, at least no longer compared to Vietnam. So we are seeing, again, a pretty strong import performance if we take a perspective over a number of years during January to March. Provisional figures for March were a little bit down, but relatively steady. The Jan-March period, again, is down by about 18% on 2022. I don't think we should be surprised by that. Bear in mind, last year, India imported a 1.36 million tons of RCN. There's bound to be a hangover from that. The figure is well up on 2021, but it's down on 2020. And part of that would be a shift in origins, a little bit less from Tanzania, perhaps. But also, I suspect that the absence of Benin from the market, even the early shipments from Benin that might come, and perhaps a little bit less from Ghana in the early part of the year too, has impacted the figures. And there may also be a factor there where buyers are waiting to see if the rupee against the dollar improves a little bit. It was expected to be weaker this year, but it has surprised a few people. And it may well be that people are looking for further improvement in the rupee. And that's based on balance of payments in India, which seems to be coming in a little bit better than expected. So about steady, a little bit down. It'll be interesting to see the next steps in terms of actual imports. But remember, these are imports, and this is up to March, which means that those are not really new crop West Africa shipments yet. They would have arrived in March. They'd only be the very early shipments, if any. And it's April, May that will tell us the story a little bit better. So let's take an overview then of production and major talking points around the world. In Vietnam, well, the talk about the crop in Vietnam is getting a little bit worse. I mean, this is talk. I'm not talking about absolutely confirmed figures, but some people are saying the crop could be down by about 25%. That means quite a lot locally in Vietnam. It doesn't mean an awful lot in the world perspective, in so much as that Vietnam is today a relatively small producer compared to its neighbor Cambodia, Cote d'Ivoire, or West Africa generally. Farm gate prices are lower in Vietnam, and that's partially due to lower quality. Import RCN prices have dropped down, continue to drop down, maybe another $20 off them on lack of buying. And even with this, it still is really difficult to see how processors can make a good calculation based on imported RCN. It still is a very tight calculation for them. And it's been that way for some time. Despite a slightly steadier kernels market, we haven't really seen an impact on kernels prices yet. Looking at Cambodia, not a great deal of news. The season is almost over now. The exports, I just noticed a report that by value, not by tons, but by value, exports were down about 10%. That means lower prices. Now, that could have an impact on future growth. We have seen in the last few years a reduction in the hectares planted in Cambodia. So that probably means that a lot of young trees, not mature trees, but probably young trees, were taken out. There's also more than likely a situation where, as you see in any boom situation, that trees were planted in areas where perhaps they shouldn't have been planted, and that farmers will now be revising that. But keep an eye on Cambodia over the coming year and into next year. It seems more and more likely that production is going to stabilize around about the current levels, and we won't see this march to 1 million tons that was predicted only 12 months ago. Looking in India, again, a good crop predicted. I see a bigger figure this week, predicted 770,000 tons from an official body. Again, interesting, but let's remind ourselves, India will import this year more than 60% of the raw cashew nuts that it uses. So 30,000 tons on the domestic crop doesn't have a huge impact in the global picture. Moving to West Africa, and the biggest producer, Côte d'Ivoire, slow trade on raw cashew nuts, prices well below the minimum price. And this again is not surprising. What we're seeing here is the impact of Cambodia, the impact of more production in that February-March window, meaning that buyers will come later. And here in Côte d'Ivoire, and of course, right across the region, that's an issue, because if the product isn't moving, it needs to be stored. It may well move later, but it needs to be stored, and it needs to be dried well, and it needs to be handled well, and it needs to be financed. So this arrival of Cambodia can have this impact of highlighting the infrastructure deficits in West African countries. Similarly, in Benin, introduction of new legislation over the last couple of years in preparation for the ban on the export of raw cashew nuts. High minimum price, no shipments until May or possibly June by the time the paperwork's put together. This should be an opportunity for processors in the country to buy at a reasonable price, but they may be a little bit frustrated by the fact that the minimum price at the farm gate is quite high in terms of the world kernels market. And again, that's this contradiction, this mismatch that we've been talking about for some time. Looking in Ghana, again, farm gate prices lower. The crop in Ghana is over. Prices are well below government minimum pricing. Government minimum pricing was set quite high this year, and rightly so when it was set. But it's a difficult situation in Ghana to work out, because you have so much in terms of cross-border imports. And if Ghana imports possibly as much as 200,000 tons legitimately, because it needs to move to ports for export, also a certain amount of cross-border trade, which is legitimate from a Ghanaian point of view. And what we've seen after a volatile start, where probably the market started a little bit too high at the farm gate, and probably right now it's slipped back possibly a little bit too low at the farm gate. And then you have this balancing act, not only for traders and farmers, but also for regulators in how to manage the market in this tricky period of the year. Looking at Nigeria, not a great deal of news. It's a much better crop, I think, than last year, according to information, but it's not the 500,000 tons that's been talked about in some media outlets. Inventing numbers doesn't make them true. The market there has been less volatile. There's no government intervention. There's no minimum pricing. There's no intervention in the supply chain other than a certain amount of support for export and tax incentives for investment in processing. There is talk that the government of Nigeria will introduce some sort of a cashew policy this year, but that's not yet formulated, and certainly I haven't seen any drafts of that. It may be more hope than belief that that will happen this year. Overall, I would say that the crop picture over the last 2 weeks has become maybe a little bit weaker, a little bit less, but there's no question there will be enough raw cashew nuts in the world this year to meet demand. There's no real supply issue, but what we are seeing is a quality issue emerging, and that quality issue, especially in West Africa, is related to infrastructure and the fact that the arrival of Cambodia over the last 3 years as a huge supplier for Vietnam has shifted the window for buying further down the line later in the year, or at least the possibility for buying later in the year, and that's having an impact on markets. And of course, traders, and rightly so, they're using that to get what they need to get. Processors still faced with that difficulty that even at current RCN prices, they're struggling to make a margin. And that is not simply down to the value of cashew kernels in the world market. It's also down to the fact that it's huge cost to move cashew kernels from where they grow, the 1.6 to 1.8 million tons in West Africa, to where they're processed. And that cost is undermining the profitability of the industry. So as we were saying, Vietnam has multiple issues right now. And they are making moves mostly related to higher value addition to tackle that. But what would tackle it is a return to more healthy cashew kernels prices. So the outlook then, I'm thinking production estimates are slipping, but I don't see any particular price impact on that. It certainly is not going to firm the market in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Question will be, will governments act on minimum pricing? How will they act if they do act? There is an opportunity within these low RCN prices for West African processors, less competition, so it can be an opportunity for processors, but in the short term at least, it's not so good for farmers. If we look at demand, I think that there still is a risk that, influenced by retailers or retailers themselves, may miss this opportunity to buy something at these current prices. We're still looking at extremely low levels, 10-year lows. You would certainly not want to be short in this market in terms of risk management. It would be highly, highly speculative to remain short in a market at these current levels. So the only reason you wouldn't buy would be that you think you don't need it. If you think you need it, you'll buy, and you should buy. But if you think that demand will not recover, and that's the question that needs to be asked, particularly at the retail level. But there is a timing issue too. And that timing issue is that retailers may not be ready to buy. And they don't really follow the market closely. So they might be looking at it thinking, well, no, hold on a minute. We don't buy till September, for example. It doesn't really matter what the price is now. If we look in India, again, key market, some demand returning, but I would say it's probably a little bit slow. We're only into the early days of the new financial year. That may have an impact. Let's wait and see how it continues. We're not talking about any means a crisis in demand in India, just maybe it's a little bit slower than was expected. So that's the outlook for the time being. I've tried to give you a global picture. We're now going to focus in, and we're going to try now and focus on the sub-region that is our main subject for today. Guinea, Senegal, the Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau. So for those of you who might want to know exactly where that is, you can see on the map, we're talking about this region here. So this would be the sub-region in West Africa, which is the latest to harvest. So the West African harvest starts here in Nigeria and works its way across and finishes in Senegal. Probably it'll go on until July, at least the harvesting and collection will. Marketing might go on a little bit better. Production trends over the entire region. The main producer is Guinea-Bissau, as I'm sure you'll be aware, and we see a generally positive trend in production. It is highly influenced by the prices that are available. So you will see that production dips a little bit when prices are lower. But generally a positive trend. We're looking at a region that produces some really good quality cashew kernels. So overall, it produces about 16% of the West African crop. It produces high quality, high outturn, good sized kernels, particularly the Gambia, Senegal, and of course Guinea-Bissau. They're not uniform across those three countries. There are different quality factors, but we won't go into those too far. But you can see that outturn yield is quite good. And also if we looked at size, we would see that they are also quite large. Guinea is a little bit different. Guinea, the cashews are a much more standard average quality than we would see in either Senegal or in Guinea-Bissau. The region is a little bit behind, I suppose, in terms of its processing development, certainly behind countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Nigeria. It is mixed in terms of its regulation. So we have, in some countries, quite a lot of regulatory mechanisms, but this is often matched by poor implementation. We have older trees in Guinea-Bissau generally in need of rehabilitation, and there is a lot of work going on in that area. Younger trees in Guinea and the Gambia, and something of a mix in Senegal, where there is a lot of new production, but there's also some older trees. So the region is very, very similar in many ways, but there are differences between the countries too. And the differences in regulation and the differences in tax regimes and some infrastructure issues mean that there is a lot of trade between the countries, informal trade. Much of it is illegal, but it happens. People find ways to do things that need to be done. And we see that there is a lot of trade, for example, from Guinea-Bissau into Senegal. Some of it ends up in the Gambia, mostly re-exported as raw cashew nuts. Also, and this isn't illegal, but also trade flowing in from Mali into Guinea, into all countries, even a little bit from Cote d'Ivoire to Guinea, although that also goes the other way. So you get this quite difficult to read situation where there is formal, recorded, statistical record of trade from the ports, and then this mishmash of informal trade and smuggling across borders within the sub-region. Really interesting place, very interesting place to visit too. And it is going to be a real pleasure to listen to some of our guests' contributions on this. So let's start with John Rao. John, how are you?
Morning, Jim. How are you doing?
I'm very well. It's great to have you on again. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
How are things with you?
Pretty good. I've been traveling quite a bit. Just landed in Bissau last week, in fact. I was in Senegal, I was in Dubai, and a couple of other places. As you can imagine, closing up loose ends from the last season and preparing for the upcoming season.
And how do you see that season evolving, John?
I think the demand is there. From the crop side, the crops are going to be good. Very good flowering, very good growing of the fruit. In fact, from the Bulama area, we have already received a lot of the early fruit and kernels. But from the regulatory side, it's a complete mix-up. And it's really a pity, considering this is such a sensitive season. You have different factions arguing for an increase in taxes. The minimum price has been set at 375 CFR, same as Benin. I think in Guinea-Bissau, we try to benchmark against Benin. because a lot of these nuts go to India, and the Benin quality is preferred in India, as you know. So they have set the minimum price at 375. Obviously, the market works in its own way. Current trade is happening around 250 in the bush. And there's still an ongoing discussion whether taxes should be increased or decreased, and whether the reference price for taxes should be increased or decreased. And there's a commission appointed by the Deputy Prime Minister. The commission is meeting today, will submit proposals to the Council of Ministers tomorrow. And hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have some clarity on the tax structure for this week, for this season.
Difficult enough to do business in that kind of volatile environment without knowing the tax structure.
Lot of optimism, Jim. A lot of optimism.
I think you have to be optimistic to be in the cashew business.
We are diehard optimists out here. And so we always hope the next season is going to be better than the last.
Let's hope. What about production this year, John? How are you seeing it?
Production is very good. Should be the same or more than last year. In fact, I think last year's figures are slightly underreported because I presume a larger quantity exfiltrated across the borders. Officially, for example, we have shipped only about 197,000 tons from the port of Guinea-Bissau. And compared to a year or two before, we had shipped about 235,000 tons. Now, definitely none of our regions have reported a drop in production last year. So obviously 35,000 tons has gone somewhere, right? This is apart from the usual quantity that is exfiltrated across the borders.
So I was looking at some of the import data from the other side, the destinations, and it does suggest that there was quite a lot of cross-border trade last year.
A lot of cross-border trade, borne out by the export figures from the port of Ziguinchor in Senegal. And also to be kept in mind that even as of today, we have about 25,000 tons being held in Guinea-Bissau, in Bissau, in fact. So the good thing is it's in most of it is in Bissau City. So there will not be much of mixing with the new crop upcountry. The bad news is if some bad actors want to start mixing it in Bissau City, then that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, but, it has been a feature across West Africa this year, a little bit of mixing.
But I must mention that the government has taken some steps in that direction. They've reduced the taxes and duties by 50% for old crop. And they're optimistic that they will ship out most of the old crop before the new crop starts coming in, because most of the old crop is actually in the hands of one exporter. So let us hope it works out.
It's quite a smart idea, isn't it? It's a good solution to stop mixing, which would damage as I would say, would damage the brand.
Yes, it should have been taken earlier maybe, but anyway, better late than never.
And what about the port and freight this year? It's been volatile in recent years. What's the situation in terms of freight rates?
Are far lower this year. And this is the beauty of the cashew business. Nothing is predictable. Usually, shipping in bulk is cheaper than shipping by container, right?
Right.
But this year, we have received offers in the range of $150 per ton for bulk shipments. And the freight by containers working out about $130 might go lower.
That's unusual.
And this is, I think, credit to competition, because it's not just CMAC, Jim, but even MSC that is operating here. Maersk's absence is not being felt much. As you know, 3 or 4 years ago, Maersk had to leave the country overnight, in fact.
Yeah.
And but I think the other two lines are picking up the slack. And worldwide, as you know, MSC has been really adding huge, capacity to its fleets and all that. So it's, I think, good. It's good for us consumers, that us customers, that we're going to get good freight rates.
Yeah. So we're looking at, if I understand it well, we're still waiting for answers on the tax situation. And there's a debate on that. We're looking at excellent production. Freight rates are lower. There's preferential export tariff on old crop to move the balance 25,000 tons. No big quality issues. And just could be, once it settles down, this could be quite a good season.
Oh, definitely. I think so. All the indications are there. All depends on the price. And the price, frankly, is not so much of a government issue. It is an issue of, I would say, overexcitement on the part of buyers. I mean, this is exactly what pushed up prices last year. I mean, there was no logical reason. And all of us regretting at leisure, end of the season, asking each other, why did you buy at such a high price? And every guy says, like, I looked at you, I looked at Mr. X, I looked at Mr. Y, and that's why even I bought at a high price. So that's herd mentality for you.
It sounds very Cashew. Thank you, John. That's terrific. Stay with us if you would, please. I'm sure there'll be a few questions coming your direction.
Yeah.
So let's move on then, and let's have a chat on Guinea. And Tierno Balde is with us from Guinea. Bonjour Tierno, ça va?
Bonjour tout le monde. J'espère que tout le monde m'entend là.
So let me ask you for your view on the crop in Guinea and how the season is going. How do you see production for this year?
Bon, ce que je pourrais dire par rapport à la production de cette année, elle est pas assez importante comme l'année dernière, mais cela peut être dû au fait qu'il y a un énorme stock invendu l'année dernière qui est encore disponible. Donc, puisque les producteurs n'ont pas fait assez de ventes, ils n'ont pas, disons, entretenu trop les champs pour pouvoir, en principe, ou ils n'ont pas investi dans les champs pour que la production puisse s'améliorer. Donc, cela a fait que la production cette année, elle est un peu faible, même si la qualité est plus importante que l'année dernière, parce que cette année, la qualité est meilleure que l'année dernière. Donc, à ce niveau, il y a, comment dirais-je, sur le long terme, ce que nous essayons de faire avec les autorités gouvernementales, c'est comment apporter un appui pour améliorer ce mécanisme, parce que si cette année aussi la situation qui est en train de se dégrader là continue comme ça, c'est sûr qu'on aura encore des stocks invendus et cela peut affecter la production l'année prochaine. Donc, nous sommes en train de travailler avec les acteurs étatiques pour essayer d'apporter un appui pour améliorer, comment on appelle ça, pour améliorer la situation. Donc, les scénarios qui puissent peut-être arriver, c'est si, par exemple, il n'y a pas eu d'appui conséquent et que cette année, la situation se dégrade, qu'il y ait des migrants, cela peut considérer... Vous m'entendez?
I think we're having some issues with the interpretation.
Sorry about that, Jim. I think we are back now.
Okay. Well, I hope everyone has been able to understand what Tierno has been saying. But let me ask you another question, Tierno Balde. What's the outlook for cashew processing in Guinea? What's the situation in terms of current developments, and what is the outlook for processing in the future?
Bon, actuellement en Guinée, comme vous le savez, nous avons une unité industrielle de 10 000 tonnes qui fonctionne depuis 2019. Qui constitue en principe le leader du marché. Et actuellement, ils sont en train de travailler sur une nouvelle unité dans la région de Bokeh qui va faire 10 000 tonnes. Ça, c'est sur le plan vraiment semi-industriel avec des quantités importantes. Mais il y a le FAO et le Fonds des Nations Unies pour l'agriculture qui est en train d'apporter des appuis à des coopératives pour les aider à avoir des petites unités de transformation, même si la quantité n'est pas importante. Mais l'écosystème de la transformation est en train d'évoluer progressivement parce que si toutes ces unités deviennent opérationnelles, on va se retrouver avec au minimum 25 000 tonnes de cajou carrément transformés au niveau local. Mais comme je vous le dis, il y a vraiment des initiatives en cours dans ce sens-là pour pouvoir vraiment renforcer la transformation. Et cela fait même partie des initiatives prises par l'interprofession pour plaider auprès du gouvernement pour qu'il y ait des mécanismes qui puissent encourager le secteur privé à investir en principe davantage dans le domaine de la transformation. Parce que vous savez, la qualité en Guinée s'améliore chaque année. Et nous avons de l'anacar qui est à 53 ou 54 cette année. Donc, ça veut dire que la qualité est en train de s'améliorer. Et c'est vraiment une opportunité pour le secteur privé.
So there is some good progress. I'm glad to hear it. Merci beaucoup, Tierno. Stay with us for a few moments. We're going to move and have a chat with our guests from the Lift Cashew project and ask them for their views on the situation in Senegal and the Gambia this year. Good morning. Mamadou. Good morning, but we cannot hear you very well, Mamadou. You sound like you're not close to the microphone.
An MOU for that. So and also our and custom taxes are still
Jim, à vous. C'est intéressant tout ceci. Il me tarde de vous visiter quelque part le mois prochain. Et là, je pourrais continuer cette discussion avec vous une fois sur le terrain. Amadou, merci beaucoup. Là, nous venons d'entendre Amadou Balé, consultant au niveau du Global Bio Agro. Je vois que nous n'avons plus assez de temps. Nous retournons à Blessing pour voir s'il y a des questions pour notre invité. Je vois par exemple une question qui s'adresse à Tierno. Oui, Jim, en effet, il y a certaines questions ici dans la boîte à questions-réponses. Nous allons commencer avec la première qui s'adresse à vous. Quelles sont les raisons qui expliquent la chute du prix des noix brutes en Afrique de l'Ouest, surtout au Ghana? Est-ce que ce n'est pas une bonne raison pour que les transformateurs locaux puissent se saisir de cette opportunité? Eh bien, je dirais que la raison qui explique cette réduction du prix sont multiples. Il y a le fait que la chose a commencé vers la fin de l'année passée et au début de cette année. La récolte au niveau du Cambodge, qui est influencée par un certain nombre de raisons économiques. Les prix de nos noix brutes vont devoir tôt ou tard s'aligner sur le prix de l'amande. Mais nous avons deux types de marché de l'amande. Nous avons le marché double dont la valeur est autour de 2,6 $ à 2,8 $. Et il y a le prix de l'Inde qui est environ 1 $, qui est supérieur au prix du précédent par environ 1 $. Donc, oui, c'est vrai, il s'agit là d'une opportunité que les transformateurs locaux peuvent exploiter, mais cela risque d'être difficile, surtout lorsque le prix bord champ est fixé et c'est très élevé. C'est ça le danger de fixer un prix bord champ et d'utiliser de trop réglementer le secteur, parce que si vous ne savez pas faire, les transformateurs locaux ne pourront pas s'en sortir. Donc, si le prix sur le marché va en dessous du prix minimum, s'ils veulent l'acheter à ce prix, eh bien, ils seront en train de violer la loi. Donc, voilà la difficulté de la chose. Je pense que quand nous voyons le Ghana en particulier, vous savez, le cas du Ghana, peut-être que on peut se dire qu'il y a trop de marchés. Il y a le marché pour les cultures produits au Ghana et il y a un autre marché pour tous les autres produits qui viennent de la Côte d'Ivoire et des pays enclavés, surtout du Nord. Et la qualité est un peu mélangée, les prix sont également différents. Donc, nous ne serons pas étonnés de voir un prix élevé pour des produits de bonne qualité et après, le prix va se stabiliser au fur et à mesure que nous avançons. Mais la tendance serait difficile à prédire, mais Ghana, le marché ghanéen risque d'être un peu plus volatile que durant les années précédentes. En outre, nous avons également les prix euh, minimums qui sont un peu trop ambitieux. Donc, je pense que les régulateurs ont raison lorsqu'ils faisaient leur calcul autour de 15 décembre parce qu'au fait, le marché a beaucoup évolué entre-temps. Donc là, nous avons une opportunité pour les producteurs locaux d'exploiter la situation, mais ceci dépendra de la manière dont les réglementations seront mises en œuvre et la nécessité de mettre en place au Ghana un marché unique. Merci. Blessing à vous. Jim, merci beaucoup pour votre réponse. La question suivante. Jusqu'à quel niveau COVID a impacté l'aspect logistique de notre secteur? Dans notre secteur, autant pour moi, vous vous rappelez, John Brown a dit que le flux de fret s'est réduit au fil des années et je pense que les frais sont moins chers comparativement à l'utilisation des navires et normalement, nous examinons le marché et nous sommes conscients du fait que le prix des frais ne sont pas encore au même niveau qu'ils étaient avant la pandémie, mais la tendance est encourageante. Donc, cela a eu un impact sur la position stratégique des pays africains parce que l'un des avantages de l'achat en Afrique de l'Ouest est justement le fait que l'aspect freight est en train de disparaître. En outre, la COVID a poussé les gens à revoir leurs approches, la manière dont le marché réagit, comment il faudrait stocker les stocks et comment gérer les frais. Et c'est comme si sur certains marchés, par exemple en Europe, euh, les gens ne se rappellent plus, les gens se rappellent encore beaucoup de la crise, alors que le marché américain a pratiquement oublié la COVID. Donc, je me dis que au fil des années, ce que nous voyons, c'est que l'impact de la COVID sur le secteur commence pas à disparaître, mais l'aspect psychologique, c'est-à-dire le niveau où les gens sont prêts à prendre des risques, continue d'être élevé. La prochaine question, Jim, s'adresse à Dionor de la Guinée. Vous avez mentionné les usines de transformation semi-industrielle dans la région de Bouquet qui pourraient permettre de transformer localement jusqu'à hauteur de 5 000 tonnes. Quelles sont les mesures prévues pour écouler les produits transformés compte tenu de la faible consommation en Afrique? La question suivante s'adresse à Mamadou de l'East Cashew Project. Mamadou, quelle est la situation actuelle de la transformation locale au niveau du projet de la région Ségabi? Et qu'est-ce que vous êtes en train de faire comme intervention? Je vais répéter la question. Quelle est la situation actuelle de la transformation dans la région de Ségabi? Quelles sont les interventions dont vous avez besoin et qu'est-ce que vous êtes en train de faire dans le domaine de la transformation locale? Peut-être que nous allons passer la parole à toi pour voir son intervention dans le secteur en Guinée-Bissau. En ce qui concerne la Guinée-Bissau, nous avons bien commencé, mais arrivé un moment, les efforts ont commencé nous avons lancé 3 unités de transformation avec un bon financement et une forte capacité, mais d'une manière ou d'une autre, euh, l'exploitation au quotidien a beaucoup de défis. Je pense qu'il est temps que le gouvernement puisse intervenir dans le secteur. En outre, tout le monde essaie de trouver des solutions qui parfois ne sont pas très conviviales à l'environnement. Je pense que c'est ça l'un des problèmes parce que cela a un impact sur toute la chaîne de valeur. En outre, il y a la question de financement. Nous avons dit que les entrepreneurs devraient financer la mise en place de l'unité de transformation ainsi que le marketing. Mais dans la plupart des pays, ce n'est pas ainsi. Par exemple, plusieurs producteurs doivent transformer assez de noix et ont des difficultés à obtenir les noix localement. Il est même plus facile d'obtenir les noix du Sénégal et dans d'autres pays voisins. Donc, vous voyez, là, il faudrait trouver une solution pour pouvoir alimenter ces unités de transformation. Je pense que l'une des solutions, c'est d'avoir des garanties au niveau de la banque et que les fonds ne seront pas mal gérés. Sinon, le secteur n'est pas tellement fiable. C'est d'ailleurs l'une des raisons clés, surtout dans des pays tels que la Guinée-Bissau. Nous, nous avons certains pays nous avons les responsables clés se disent que bon, ils peuvent vivre sans l'anacade. La même chose pour le Sénégal et pour le Sénégal, c'est la même chose et pour d'autres pays. Mais pour mon pays, honnêtement, nous ne pourrons pas nous permettre de dire que nous pouvons survivre sans l'anacade. Et pourtant, le pays n'est pas tellement industriellement développé. L'anacade est un produit guinéen, ou plutôt devrais-je dire que l'économie de la Guinée repose sur l'anacade. C'est pourquoi le gouvernement devrait s'asseoir pour voir ensemble avec les différents acteurs comment sauver le secteur. Et les chances de succès sont autour de 50%. D'accord, c'est vraiment décevant de voir que le pays qui a le plus de besoin pour la transformation est malheureusement le même pays qui est le moins performant en matière de transformation. Il est clair que peut-être le gouvernement a également besoin de financement externe. Je vois que Mamadou est de retour. Mamadou, j'aimerais que vous puissiez intervenir. La, le plus grand défi pour les transformateurs ici, c'est l'accès aux finances. Par exemple, au Sénégal, les grandes sociétés de transformation, ce CPL, nous leur avons donné des prêts en 2020 Et ils ont fait une nouvelle demande pour 2022 et 2023, dont le traitement est en cours. Ce que nous avons observé, c'est que les unités de transformation doivent présenter des garanties et très élevées. Les taux d'intérêt également sont un autre. Tao, c'est la même chose. J'aimerais d'ailleurs vous annoncer que nous avons des activités du fonds de l'ANACAD avec 1,5 million pour lancer le secteur dans le pays. Jusqu'à présent, seuls 4 requérants ont envoyé leur demande. Nous avons accordé un prêt à une seule unité de transformation qui opère depuis Guinée-Bissau. Donc, nous avons besoin d'appeler de requérants qui doivent venir présenter leurs demandes pour que nous puissions les accompagner. Nous ne voyons pas beaucoup de motivation au Sénégal et en Gambie. Par exemple, l'année passée en Gambie, c'est seulement 3 pays qui ont souscrit pour ces prêts. Le montant total accordé était 100 000 $. En Guinée-Bissau, c'était autour de 400 000 $ et au Sénégal, c'était autour de 200 000 $. Cette année, nous avons doublé les valeurs, mais il n'y a pas beaucoup d'engouement pour la chose et notre intérêt, les taux d'intérêt pour cette année sont très concurrentiels, surtout comparativement aux banques traditionnelles. Donc, le processus au niveau de Segabi, je dirais que c'est un peu timide pour l'instant. En outre, au Sénégal, il n'y a pas tellement d'engouement, il n'y en a pas du tout. Les acteurs clés au niveau de la région Segabi font face à beaucoup de défis en ce qui concerne l'accès au financement. Jim, d'accord, mais comment est-ce que les institutions pourraient savoir que les fonds sont disponibles? Est-ce que ces informations sont sur vos sites web? Oui, en effet, vous pouvez les voir sur mon site web et je suis disposé également à partager mon contact personnel dans la boîte à discussion pour que vous puissiez me contacter directement. Et je fais partie du conseil d'administration en charge de l'octroi de ces prêts. Donc, je suis prêt à vous accompagner et vous donner également le contact de nos responsables qui sont en charge de ces prêts. C'est quand même un processus très simple qui permettrait aux unités de transformation d'avoir accès à ces financements en l'espace de 2 à 3 semaines. D'accord? Merci beaucoup. Il faudrait veiller mettre dans la boîte à discussion vos contacts pour toute personne qui serait intéressée. C'est fait. Merci beaucoup. Avant que je ne repasse la parole à Blessing, je voudrais remercier nos invités pour les contributions très instructives. Jean, merci pour votre contribution. John nous donne toujours des informations très riches. Amadou Bandé, merci de vous être joint à nous une fois encore. Merci beaucoup pour vos contributions. Le projet Livre Cashew, Mamadou Badbé, Sissé, tous les autres collègues qui se sont joints à nous pour la première fois, merci beaucoup. J'espère que nous aurons l'opportunité de vous écouter encore récemment et très bientôt. Merci pour votre partage. C'est là un projet très intéressant. J'espère que j'aurai l'opportunité de pouvoir vous visiter. Une fois encore, merci à tout le monde qui s'est joint à nous aujourd'hui. C'est toujours un réel plaisir de vous avoir avec nous. N'hésitez pas en cas de, lorsque vous avez besoin d'informations, de nous contacter. Merci beaucoup. Je repasse la parole à Blessing. Merci beaucoup, Jim. Merci également à nos invités, Jim. Avant que vous nous partiez, pourriez-vous partager avec nous les points saillants du prochain iForum? Oui, bon, durant les semaines prochaines, nous allons avoir plus d'informations sur les tendances mondial, mais je ne m'attends pas à une grande évolution. La semaine prochaine ou bien la semaine prochaine, bon, les prix pourront évoluer, mais je pense que ce ne sera pas quelque chose de très important. Ce que j'aimerais dire, c'est de chercher à résoudre le puzzle du prix hors champ pour permettre aux commerçants d'écouler leurs produits et de permettre à tout un chacun de permettre aux transformateurs locaux de pouvoir saisir l'opportunité qu'offre cette campagne et également au niveau de la Guinée-Bissau. Nous allons un peu parler de cela. Sinon, je ne m'attends pas à une période très volatile. Je pense qu'au fait, nous sommes en train d'entrer progressivement dans une période plus positive de l'industrie. Donc, nous devons faire attention à cela et garder un œil sur les marchés qui sont pour l'instant silencieux, surtout le marché américain, parce que lorsque ces marchés vont être relancés, ils vont pouvoir influencer beaucoup les achats. Merci beaucoup, Blessing. Jim, merci. Merci une fois encore à John Brown, Yobandé et Mamadou Bandé pour cette rejoint à nous. Mesdames et messieurs, nous tenons à vous remercier d'avoir pris la peine de vous joindre à nous. Au nom de l'ACA, nous voulons remercier nos différents partenaires qui nous permettent de pouvoir organiser la rencontre des marchés avec Jim Patrick. Une fois encore, j'aimerais vous rappeler que la date pour la 17e conférence pour la 17e conférence de l'ACA et son exposition, c'est du 1er au 21 du mois. Et je vous remercie. Au revoir.
Recording stopped.